There we go. Great. So, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us at Mantra Strategies Impact Culture session. We've been running a few of these. They're always on topics that we really love, but also things that can help us in our everyday. Today, we're talking the DNA of success, creating a positive and high performance team or culture, a bit of both. We'll get into that. And I suppose we're delighted to bring you this kind of bite-sized learning webinar format. A little bit about us first, and then I'll talk about the agenda. We're the Impact Creation Consultancy, and we do focus on organization development, purposeful strategy, intentional change management. Really all about, though, helping you dream bigger for a better world, leading your teams effectively. We find a lot of the time that's down to clear strategy. A lot of the time that's down to confidence. A lot of the time it's down to having the right people, right culture. We also work to help you position yourself and your brand for success and to thrive. So we offer strategic sounding boards. That's kind of us in a nutshell. Some of the team, you'll see a few of us on the call here today. Shout out to Julie as well, and Kira, who's helped us start these impact culture sessions, but finishes up with us tomorrow. So just to say thank you to Kira as well while we're here. So our topic today, as I said, is culture, success, and it weaves in a lot of different things. So I'm going to just outline a few themes that we want to explore. Then we're going to be joined by David Duggan to bring it to life. That'll be a really good discussion. I'm really excited about it. And I'll intro David properly in a moment. We'll round out with some of our top tips and takeouts, and then we open up to get contributions from anybody who's here on the live session today. So without further ado, I'll get into some of the themes that we want to explore. So just starting out, quick intro. These are just our themes. So one is subjectivity. We're talking about high performance. We're talking about successful culture, positivity. They are all subjective terms. So we want to discuss today what we mean by higher performance, high performance, successful culture, positivity. Like, what are we talking about? What are we not talking about? And we'll do that. Myself and David will have a really good kind of conversation around that. And I'd love to suggest people also use the chat function throughout who are here on the call to contribute around that kind of subjectivity and what it means to you. The second topic or theme we're going to really get into is the soil to thrive. So what is the right environment? What is the right culture? And even subjectivity around that, because it may be different for different folks, different demos, different organizations, etc. The third, I suppose, just in that we are going to get into context, climate, culture, different kind of industries, all that sort of stuff. So again, no matter where you're, here from, everybody's contribution really welcome. The third is just about how success and high performance isn't always linear. And it's a topic we want to explore insofar as it doesn't all happen following an exact formula. So it's not like we start doing this today and in 3 weeks we'll see X, Y, or Z result. It's not that clear cut, and there's nobody exactly getting it perfect. I think that's fair to say. We've come across, and we will discuss some really good examples. And there are some really great models that we can refer to, and we're going to dig into some of those today. But just to say, a theme for us is this isn't a one size fits all, and it isn't exactly linear that it all happens in perfect order. The fourth topic and theme that we'll be kind of really exploring in a bit more detail is perspective. And I suppose what I want us to think about when I mention that, and really invite your contributions and also David's on, is how not everyone in the organization might feel high performance or culture equally or the same. and that our own context and environments can have a different impact on that. So again, going to really talk about that. We're going to talk then about the role that different people play. So whose job is it to create this culture, and the role we can all play in co-creating success. And the final theme really for our discussions is going to be around the kind of common threads that weave together the best practice that we've come across. So what are the daily non-negotiables that some leaders do that actually do generate really positive successes? What are the models, or, we're going to talk
Jerry's
just
not
now
here
about
either, so maybe we just.
the 5 dysfunctions of
Jerry's
team.
not here as well. Yeah.
I'm sorry,
All
there's
right.
a bit of feedback from someone there. Sorry. Yeah, we're going to just talk about the 5 dysfunctions of team as well, and just get under the bonnet a little bit more, those dysfunctions, and therefore ways to overcome them. And we'll open the floor. So that's kind of the gist of our themes, just to frame it so that you know the kind of learning outcomes. It will be a discussion that goes in and around each of those. So I'll start us off by just bringing up one model, and I've taken this in the interest of not spending crazy amount of time. We're not going to go through it all, but just if anybody hasn't come across the 5 dysfunctions of a team before, it's a great book. And we have it in our mantra whispers at the end. It's Patrick Lencioni, and he talks about the 5 things from starting from the point of when these aren't there, how things go terribly wrong. And I would say, again, back to the not linear. They're not always there. They're not always perfect, but we're going to dig into these topics a little bit more. So just from the bottom rather than the top: lack of trust, fear of conflict, lack of commitment. And that can be down to that role we play in things, and we'll talk about that. Avoidance of accountability, and inattention to results. So that's just a framer. Can I have for those who are on the call, or anybody who has their cameras on, has everyone come across this model before? Is this something that's familiar to some? I see some shaking and some nodding. Okay. So we're going to dig into this a little bit, because I think it's something myself and David could talk about forever. And I'm going to just introduce David at this stage, and start some really good discussions around this. So just in terms of quick little intro about David, he's the director of Below the Line. He has vast experience, which is why over many years I pulled him in. When I was a CEO, when I was a fundraising director, I got him in working with my teams. And he's extensive kind of local development and training experience, designing, delivering leadership and org development programs nationally and internationally. Below the Line clients include World Rugby, Allied Irish Bank, HubSpot, and many, many others. But David is also someone who I would definitely consider a really good friend of Mantra and me personally. And we have shared the floor with loads of different companies doing emotional culture sessions and work around this area. So I'm delighted he could join us today so that we can explore these different themes. I'm going to stop sharing the presentation and just get into conversation for a little while. So thanks, David, and welcome.
Thanks, Lisa Nicole, and thanks for having me. Appreciate it. It's funny looking at the people who are here on the call and the list and all the rest. I was thinking, God, there's some people here that I'd love to hear from. So hopefully we get through this as quickly as we can and open up to the floor, because yeah, it's a fascinating topic.
It sure is. Yeah, no, absolutely. And we will definitely allow lots of contributions. So let's start by me just asking you, what's your perspective on the term high performance?
Yeah, good question. I'm not actually that much of a fan of it in one sense. And this is based on many years of being out there talking to organizations and businesses about high performance cultures, and people who've approached our business kind of saying, oh, some of you guys have worked in sport or in adventure and endurance. You understand high performance culture. Can we get a high performance culture in here? And my reflection on that after over the last couple of years is I think it's easier and better and more practical to talk to businesses about higher performance. So talking to a leader or a manager, about their team and how they're performing, to engage them in a conversation when you ask them, do you know what higher performance looks like or would look like in here? And they instantly go, oh yeah, you would be doing these two or three things better or more effectively, or I'd go and tackle those two or three things, as opposed to do you know what a high performance culture looks like in here? And it's often a nebulous term, or it's a difficult one to kind of get their heads around or put their hands on. So I obviously everyone strives for and wants a high performance culture, but I actually think it's more useful in some ways and more practical to talk about a higher performance culture, because I think that also allows or creates the space for, well, higher performance for the next 2 or 3 months might be these two or three things, and higher performance after that could be something else entirely. So I think it allows it to become a more ongoing conversation, because if I've learned anything about high performance, it's actually, one of my colleagues who I work with talks about this idea of transforming. So it's like a team is always transforming because it has to evolve and it's got to perform. So there's something about, well, if we know what higher performance for the next 2 or 3 months looks like, well, let's go after that. And then we can review and see what higher performance in other areas of the business or the team and its activities might look like. So that's where I would come at it from.
And I think that really does talk to that point about subjectivity in a way. Like ultimately, in one organization, high performance culture could be a very, very different thing, even around the metrics they're looking at, the going for growth kind of space, rather than, something where it's about deeper impact maybe at a particular time. So
Yeah.
being able to really make it meaningful for an organization, it's about them understanding first, where are we now, where are we trying to go and why, and then communicating that. So it's the subjectivity and making it kind of meaningful as well.
Yeah.
What about, same kind of question a little bit, but like, again, we use the title as a really good hook and draw. So DNA of success, again, may differ for different folks. So have you kind of seen where that high definition of high performance, or DNA of success, is very, very different? Can you bring to mind any examples of different organizations where they're all talking high performance, but they may mean very different things?
Yeah, and maybe to kind of join the dot between the last question and that. So the other definition, of high performance that I've gotten from a guy who I think doesn't live too far from me, Neil O'Brien, and some people on the call might know Neil. He's a psychologist, and and his business I think is called Time to Fly. But he told a great story at an event I was at a while ago about this idea of the definition for high performance for him was brilliant basics. So he relates this story of being in a call center and seeing somebody in a very high pressure environment just go through the basics of doing their job. So following the steps and the processes in this call center. And he said, that's it. That's high performance. That's just doing the basics of your job brilliantly. And if you look at, go back to the world of sport, they'll talk about just do the basics brilliantly, win the moment in front of your face, all that type of stuff. So, if I link that then to the DNA of success, in some ways, the idea of brilliant basics makes kind of high performance. It breaks it down quite simply. But yeah, I would see and come across, and I'm sure lots of people on the call have, which goes back to that point of a high performance culture in this department might mean something completely different and be actually at odds with what the other department is trying to do. So there's something about how do we get really clear sometimes about the brilliant basics that need to be done in here, in this team or in this department, and then how do we create the culture kind of at that wider level to kind of to be able to deal with the ramifications of the fact that the DNA for success in this department is completely different from yours, and we need to be able to work some of that stuff out, if that makes sense.
I think that's really interesting because I think even for those who are joining the call from kind of more commercial sales, marketing, or fundraising, even within that type of department, the different mini cultures that you might have or subcultures that you might need to have for different priorities at a different time means that high performance can mean something very, very different to each of those. And success might be brilliant basics, without bleeding into your weekend, without having to be overwhelmed, feeling like you are, managing to still sustain well-being and so on. And I think that's becoming far more the measure of successful culture in term. I don't think anybody's cracking it, but I think people are talking about, well, that's what we mean by successful. Yes, getting our goals, but not breaking in the middle of it. So again, have you seen that pattern? Oh, I didn't do that. Somebody else did that. Have you seen that pattern shift as well in terms of that? Sorry, Clodagh, you probably don't know how to do that, do you? I just close it. No problem at all. Don't worry. You can put up something on the whiteboard about high performance if you want. But David, just that shift around, well-being and the importance of that in how we determine what is great, what is great, shifting landscape and goalposts to include something a bit more rounded, thankfully.
Yeah, good question. I'm sure I'm not the only person. People would agree. I don't think organizations have got a great handle on that still. I still see people talking a good game around well-being and putting in place, you know, the yoga stuff at lunch hour and all that type of stuff. And it's a bit of the lip servicey stuff around that, or kind of saying, well, it's there for you, so we can't say we haven't provided it. So there's some of that. Uh, and on the other side, I have seen a few other organizations who, are, yeah, a little bit more conscious of people's, and we all saw that stuff during COVID. I think a lot of organizations and clients that I work with where, they were able to say, well, look, put your family first, or no emails after a certain time, or, if you're offline, we know you're taking kids to school and stuff like that. So some organizations have got good at that, and COVID was the springboard for that. So yeah, I have seen some of that, and you do see people, respond well to that, and appreciate some of that. And I know we were talking about this yesterday, the other interesting thing I've seen in this is almost an over-indexing on empathy and care. And that has kind of come back to bite certain organizations in the last few years when they've had to ask more of people, or they've had to, and the tech space would be a real classic example of this, where, I've literally had people say to me, we thought this place was a family. And it's not, because they've let people go, or they had, if you like, the bandwidth to carry a couple of people who maybe, had family commitments and issues, stuff like that. So suddenly, people have left the organization, and the organization, the business are turning around and kind of saying, well, we need you here, or we need you back, or we need more of you. So I think there's a real tension that's ongoing out there. That's something that I certainly see with some of the clients that I work with.
Absolutely. And that makes me think that changing goalposts, I think you're talking there very specifically around business priorities changing, or, needs must, financial drivers or stakeholders kind of influencing what needs to change. Have you seen much where that kind of cultural shift happens post a leader change as well? So leadership style plays a role in, how much indexing around support is happening, culture development, or intentionality of building team, and then may change completely with a new leader. Do you want to just talk a little bit about
Yeah, I'm thinking of
leaders in this and their style and how it can impact?
Yeah, so it's funny, I'm thinking of a specific client that we've been working with for the last maybe 4 or 5 years, pre-COVID, I would say, where the CEO is changing, and they haven't gone in yet. and it's an external appointment, and you can see the nerves and the jitters and the tension around the organisation. And to use your term there, the whispers are going around like, what will this person be like, you know, or what does their reputation? What is their reputation? Will it precede them? So I'm the same as everyone else. We all know that. That the leader at the change has a massive bearing, and I have seen it in other organizations where a CEO has left and somebody internal has come in, and it's been a breath of fresh air, and it's been that opportunity to kind of tackle some of the stuff that just weren't some of the things that weren't being tackled. So yeah, I mean, and for me, when we're working with CEOs or SLTs or leadership teams, whatever you want to talk about it, like we're always talking to them about the climate, and what's the climate you're setting in the organization, and can you be more intentional and conscious about that? And lots of people are aware of it, but in my experience, and I would connect that with two other things, or one other thing as well, context and climate. So we're always saying to leaders, set what context are you setting in the organization? What context are you setting for others? And what's the climate you're setting for people? And helping leaders and organizations kind of put their hands on that stuff and get more comfortable with that type of stuff, and start to kind of translate that into tangible stuff, like how we run meetings, how we ask people how they're doing, all that type of stuff. But in my experience, not enough leaders are paying attention to context and climate, and they're allowing the context to be set by the external environment or whatever's going on. So someone put in there the Trump factor at the moment. There's a real context setter, an external context setter for an organization that could be sending people into all sorts of chaos and confusion and all that type of stuff. Whereas the good leaders, I think they kind of grab some of that by the horns and say, well, what's the context we'd like to set in here? Because we can have any context we like, actually, and we can also have any climate we want. And not enough people are paying attention to setting the climate, in my experience.
So there's something about I know you talk about this a lot, intention and attention, but equally the climate, there isn't, something is going on in the world, being cognizant of that, but still facing into shaping and creating what you can control. That is neatly bringing us into the role of leader versus us all as contributor, team member, manager, individuals as well. And I want to get into that. But before we do, attention, intention, do you want to just flesh that kind of thinking out for folks in terms of this topic, how we can use that to create the right kind of culture for success and being mindful of it?
Yeah, I got this idea from my colleague Ian Kingston in the Below the Line gang, but he very early on in my working with him, because he's been a great, in the same way that you have been a great influence and support to me. I've had great people around me who just drop these little ideas in, and some of them, the ones that resonate most with me, are the ones that I almost end up using myself. That's one of the great, I think, privileges that this type of work is, that you learn and pick up these things, and then you kind of try and live them yourself.
Absolutely.
So yeah, the idea with intention is it's very simple. Like, what is your intention? What's your leadership intention? And what are you paying attention to? So if you take it away from leadership for a second, it might be your diet. I want to eat better, or I want to give up smoking, or
card is on your desk,
whatever it might
your
be.
business.
So there's your intention. And I see, and like you, I do a lot of one-to-one coaching work and all that type of stuff. And sometimes it's around some of this stuff. You'd say, well, what's your intention? Well, it's to do less of this or more of this. And you say, well, what are you paying attention to? And in the uncovering of what are you paying attention to, you will often find that I'm paying attention to everything but my intentions. So helping leaders get really clear on, well, what's your intention with your leadership? How do you want people to be experiencing you? How do and even asking people those questions. And then obviously, when you're in coaching mode, you're just letting them sit with that question. And sometimes it can take a while for somebody to figure some of that stuff out. But what is your intention with your leadership? What's your intention with your team or your organization, whatever it might be? And what are the things that you're gonna, you're gonna pay attention to? And then I would also link that then, when we're talking to people about leadership, we're usually like the broad definition that we have or we operate off is kind of setting the context to challenge and support people to be at their best in pursuit of their needs and those of the organization. So there's a bit of the other term I've come across recently is this idea of net better off. So you want people in your organization to ultimately be net better off as a result of them being there. And that's a real challenge for organizations, because an awful lot of them would say, well, I'm not net better off, I'm net worse off. So there's just some of the ideas I've come across.
Yeah, very good. Great. I want to ask you, I suppose, that piece around whose job is it anyway, right? So, the role we can each play and what we can come across. I know you and I will both have come across, as will everyone here. We've all probably met all sorts of folks along the way, and some who are happy to get on the bus with a bit of persuasion, some who are already on and trying to drive it, and others who are never getting on the bus, right? Depending where the bus is going. But let's just talk a little bit about this DNA of success is created by, co-created, shaped by everyone, but not everyone sees their role in that. Maybe just talk to us a little bit around kind of where you've seen how we create a high performance team actually, and where it starts with everyone, and how can we convince some of those folks that there's something in it for them or that they have to be part of it.
Yeah, okay. So if you like the short answer to it is it's not easy. Again, it's simple, but simple doesn't make it easy. So you're right. We're always, if I go back to that definition, setting the context to challenge and support. So there's something about challenging people. So again, I'm sure lots of people can relate to this idea, but in very broad terms, there's almost like there's two types of people, if you like, in organizations. There's those who, what you were alluding to, will say, well, what's in it for me? So we'll stand by the sidelines and wait, and I'll see now what the new initiative is, or what the latest, or if it's a merger or whatever it might be. And it was funny talking to a client about this yesterday, or sorry, the day before, about this idea of, we've taken on another office there in another part of the country, and like they don't use MS Teams, and we do, and they're not, they're just not kind of buying into this, or not, they're not coming on board, and so the idea of, oh God, well, what's in it for me is that's looming large in their world, which is, why would I use Teams? Sure, we have our system here, it's grand, we don't need it, as opposed to the other type of person I see less of, but you do see a significant cohort of them, is, how can I give to this? How can I make a contribution here? And I find that those people who have that attitude, and some of them, they're not even aware of it, but that's just part of who they are and their makeup. But those who have that attitude, they are the ones who tend to get on, and they enjoy their work more, they're more engaged, they're the ones who are promoted, etc., etc. And I had this example with the client recently where two people in the role, similar role, and one of them had, was going to be promoted, and the person who thought they were going to be promoted was the person who'd been there for longer. I have tenure, I have seniority, I have all the experience. But when I spoke to the individual, the person, the boss who was going to make the decision, they said, but they're a real what's in it for me kind of person, versus the person who's come in a year ago and is full of enthusiasm and is looking to say, how could I contribute to this? And she said, I think I'm going to go with that person. So I have a difficult conversation to have with this other individual, but this is the way I'll be positioning to them to it, which is, this person wants to be more involved, So maybe I'm going off track a little bit, but
no, that's okay. I think it's really interesting. I think I'm thinking, my head swirling, thinking, is there a role for leaders to be able to manage and give a bit of clarity to folks coming in around, my expectation is that you will do whatever it takes, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean, by the way, we're expecting you to work always on culture. And that's not what I mean by that. It's more about the, shaping and being part and leading from wherever you are. So that leading beyond your authority, just being a leader wherever you are in the organization, and that culture that allows them to contribute. Something around us saying, when I say I expect you to just lean in and be all over stuff and act as if you already have the next job and the next, that doesn't mean stay here, get a sleeping bag and move in.
Yeah.
Because things have changed, thank goodness, in most organizations.
Yeah.
But I wonder, is there a role for us all in that, about thinking about how do we articulate that to folks who maybe, some people who hadn't worked in a very different context, or who are newer into a hybrid environment now, or whatever that implication is for them.
Yeah.
But I think it was really, really interesting. I really want to, before I bring everyone in, I really want to talk about conflict with you, because when we think about the 5 different dysfunctions, let's say, in Patrick's model, one of the ones that strikes me as really important is creative conflict, or, I think in the 5 dysfunctions, it's actually named as fear of conflict, right?
Yeah.
And the flip of that is actually creative conflict, or being able to really resolve and move on. And some of that comes from knowing each other and intentional teamwork. But some of it comes from actually being able to foster an environment that allows for very healthy debate, discussion, without feeling that it's an attack on you, right? And that seems to be ebbed away in a lot of organizations now, David. So let's just talk about that conflict, not just resolution, but creating a safe space so that people can discuss, debate, etc. What have you seen, or what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so I'm immediately thinking of, if you like, this almost a triangle kind of little model that we put in front of people to get them to think about that. So at the bottom, so this is three three sections as opposed to the Lencioni kind of triangle. But so it's personal, purpose, and priorities. So care for each other, care for yourself as well. So care for yourself and care for each other, care for the purpose, and care for the priorities. But quite similar to the Lencioni model, like trust is at the bottom. If you don't have you don't have any of these things, and they don't build on each other. But and you're the same, I'm sure, as well. You step people sometimes through these Lencioni questionnaires, and they'll say, "Oh, well, we're not great on commitment, or we're not this, that, and the other." And I always say to people, "Yeah, okay, so check in on your commitment," but I always bring people back to the trust. So.
Yeah.
And there's all sorts of terms around this stuff, psychological safety, etc., etc. But the organizations that we work with, where we see kind of, because you and I were talking about this actually yesterday as well, most organizations are performing. They're doing well, they're hitting their numbers, they're hitting their targets. But we have clients where it's an absolute car crash in terms of getting those things. So if it's a rugby team, it's like people are just being bulldozed over the line, and there's collateral damage being created all around the place. And a lot of organizations kind of say, could we reduce some of that, and get better with having performance related conversations with people about, look, you're clattering into people left, right, and center here. So we always say to people, look, you've got to really care for each other. And you've got to allow some of that humanity out, because that's what enables the more robust exchange of views or disagreement. Because if I know your story, and if I know who you are, and if I've seen a little bit of that in play, then it does make some of that a little bit easier, or it allows us to go there and not create kind of carnage or difficulty elsewhere. So you asked me about, again, maybe linking back to high performance culture. Another underpinning of high performance culture is how much humanity is allowed to find expression in your team, or in your organization, or in your business. And most businesses will say, oh, we're pretty good at this, so we know each other very well. And I would say, yeah, but you don't know each other as well as you possibly could. So the organizations that I see who kind of lean into that, I'm not saying they're perfect, and I'm not saying their cultures are brilliant. They still have challenges, but at the senior leadership level, they're able to have those more difficult and challenging conversations, and some of that is able to find its way and filter down into other layers of the organization, because they see the senior leadership team acting, interacting, in a slightly different way. Because the other, the last point I would say on this is again, another thing that I see at the top level is metaphorically we're all holding hands and we're all in agreement. And then, the real meeting happens outside the team meeting, and sure, you have people going to war, telling their
Yeah.
people to go to war on behalf of the person in at the top leadership team who they've just said, absolutely, I'm involved, I'm on board with all of that. So it's insipid dysfunction filters down through the organization. So I think, and the last point, sorry to go on now, but the other idea that I think a lot of organizations and teams can't get their head around is loyalty to the team you're in above loyalty to the team you lead. So at the SLT
Yeah.
level, your priority has to be to that team because it's about the organization, and nine times out of ten it's the opposite. Well, I'm really loyal to my people down there because I care for
Yeah.
them. They're doing stuff for me, etc., etc. And this person actually has it in for me or has knifed me in the back before, and there's no way I'm going to trust them. So there's
Yeah.
all that type of stuff that you're helping people work through. But so that's why I bring it back to care for yourself, care for each other, genuine care for each other, then care for the purpose, and then
Yeah.
care for the priorities.
That's really interesting because I think, Anne, to your question here around the relationship to the vision, mission, values, I suppose to summarize vision, mission, values, which isn't the right way to do it. And David O'Connor is here. I know he'd be frowning on me for doing this, but essentially, if we bundle purpose into that category for the moment, right? Purpose, the higher purpose, that shared purpose has to be intrinsic, has to be core, right? So the more aligned an organization is to that purpose, to that cause, and therefore to each other, then, and assuming positive intent that we're all on the same page, the more high performance you can have, right? The challenge is exactly as you say, Dave, that often we know the organization's stuff, but that hasn't been brought down to a team level at exec. They actually have it at a department level. So business unit, department level, very tribal kind of functions, and it's elbows out then for agenda. Whereas actually exec and senior management teams all have this absolute need for alignment and to intentionally work on team together as a team. Otherwise, it breaks down. Now, the same can be said for every single layer in that. If it's a large organization, we're talking about every single team and function within that.
Yeah.
It's not okay. It's not good enough to just have it with your own team. It has to be with every team that you perform in. So I think that's really, really interesting and helpful. Conscious of time. So I'm just going to ask if anybody else has any other questions before we round out with a few top tips and takeaways. So does anybody else want to ask a question? Lydia, I saw that you're joining us from London. Thank you very much for joining us. If you have anything you want to ask, please do join us. You can unmute. Same applies to anyone else. If they have any thoughts or questions. Miriam.
Thank you very much. That was very interesting.
You're very
And
welcome.
it's true that in a way, trying to protect that loyalty within the team you're in before you focus on the team you are leading, it's really trying to lead by example. I have to say, sometimes the difficulties in my own team had made me realize how can we not expect difficulties in trust and collaboration in other teams that you're trying to get to work on board, collaborate, and
Yeah.
create that environment.
As David said,
So
it is
thank you.
definitely not easy, but it's really important. And I think we don't give enough, back to the attention point that David made. We don't give enough attention to working on that team. We do on our own piece because it feels like it's our KPIs and everything else is separate, when in actual fact, it's equally as important. Any other final comments? And if not, I just have a few takeaways and thoughts and recommendations for reading. But if anybody wants to come in, please do. Hi, Adele. I see you coming on screen there. Lovely to see you. Hello, everyone. I'll just thank you, David, for all of your contributions. I'm just going to reopen the presentation for one moment, just to say what we do have, and we'll send to everyone, is we have a couple of links to tools and models that are really interesting around this. The 5 dysfunctions, there's articles and links around that. 16 conditions is another model that we use quite a lot to look at the key components you need, both primary and secondary, to create the right culture for high performance. And on the Positive Psychology website, there is actually 3 strengths exercise that's free in tools. So we'll send some of this to you. The other thing you can do is really invest in team dynamics with us. So we do Belbin profiling with David, looking at emotional culture shaping, emotional intelligence, and even ways of working workshops. Sometimes be surprised how little people have cracked. How do we make this work for our own team? And facilitating some of that with problem solving can be really helpful. So that's just our stuff. We also have Mantra Thrive. If you haven't heard about it, it's a strategic sounding board every month. So it's like coaching around this stuff, but also bite-sized learning webinars, whispers, and part of a really good community. Our next event, I can't remember what it is. Sorry, I'm just going to admit that out loud. But our next event is on Wednesday, the 12th of March. We love doing these. We love that people show up time and again. And also you're welcome to invite new folks or members of your team if you think it would benefit them. We're really committed to democratizing strategic input and learning and creating better leaders. So please do get in touch with us if you think that we can help you. That is otherwise it from me. So thank you all so much. Thanks to everyone who contributed. And again, thanks, Ciara. Your last hurrah.
Thanks, Lisa Nicole.
No worries. Thanks, everyone. See you next time.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.